The small town of Oakridge was like many others scattered across the countryside, charming, close-knit, and a place where everyone seemed to know each other's business. Among its residents was Lisa Chen, a woman who blended into the background of town life so perfectly that most people barely noticed her. Every morning before sunrise, Lisa would wake up in her modest one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The place wasn't much, just enough space for her few belongings, a small bookshelf overflowing with law textbooks, and a corner desk where she studied late into the night. The walls were thin, and during winter, the old heater clanked and groaned, but it was home. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Lisa would climb into her 15-year-old blue sedan. The car had seen better days. The passenger door needed a special touch to open properly, and the radio hadn't worked in years. Yet Lisa patted the dashboard affectionately each morning, grateful that it still got her where she needed to go. Another day, another dollar, she would whisper to herself as she pulled into the staff parking lot of the Oakridge Grand Hotel. It wasn't actually grand at all, just a 3-story building that had once been the pride of Main Street but now struggled to compete with newer chains on the highway. As the hotel's head housekeeper, Lisa moved through the hallways with quiet efficiency. Her hands, though rough from years of work, were surprisingly gentle as they smoothed crisp sheets and arranged tiny shampoo bottles in perfect rows. The other housekeepers looked up to her, not because she was their supervisor, but because of her unfailing kindness and the dignity with which she approached even the most unpleasant tasks. "You missed a spot, honey," she would say with a smile to the newer staff, never making them feel small or incapable. "Here, let me show you a trick my mother taught me." What the wealthy guests who barely glanced her way didn't know, what almost no one in town knew, was that Lisa Chen had once walked the polished hallways of the country's most prestigious law school. 10 years ago, her professors had marked her as a rising star, someone whose brilliant legal mind would take her to Supreme Courts and landmark cases. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Her mother, her only family, had been diagnosed with a progressive illness. Without hesitation, Lisa had packed up her law books, deferred her final year, and returned to care for the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her alone. "It's just temporary," she told herself in those early days, studying when her mother slept, keeping her legal knowledge fresh. But temporary turned into years. The medical bills mounted, eating away at her savings and student loan money. When a position opened at the hotel, Lisa took it, grateful for the steady income and the manager who understood when she needed time off for doctor appointments. In the evenings, after her shift ended and her mother was settled, Lisa would open her laptop at the small kitchen table. The blue light illuminated her tired face as she worked through online law courses, refusing to let go of her dream entirely. Her mother would watch her from the doorway, guilt and pride battling in her eyes. "You should be arguing cases in court," her mother would say, "not cleaning up after people who don't even see you." Lisa would just smile. "I see them," she would reply. "And someday they'll see me too." When her mother passed away last year, Lisa kept working at the hotel. The routine was comforting, and she needed time to figure out her next steps. The hotel manager offered condolences and a small raise, unaware that the quiet housekeeper had once drafted mock briefs that her law professors had called brilliantly argued. Now, Lisa was just 5 classes away from finally completing her law degree. Her small apartment was filled with sticky notes, reminders of legal terms, case citations, and exam dates. Her fellow housekeepers thought she was taking business classes at the community college. Lisa never corrected them. Everyone has a story, she often thought as she cleaned the rooms of business people who left their expensive laptops open on beds. And mine isn't finished yet. Little did Lisa know that her story was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would connect her quiet life to one of the most powerful families in the state, all because of a chance encounter at a coffee shop and a man who made the mistake of judging a book by its cover. The sleek black Bentley rolled into Oakridge like a thundercloud on an otherwise sunny day. Behind the wheel sat Robert Wilson Imey, his designer sunglasses reflecting the small-town storefronts as he sneered at their quaintness. At 42 years old, Robert had perfected the art of looking down on people while barely glancing in their direction. "What a dump," he muttered into his Bluetooth earpiece. "Dad really expects me to waste 6 months of my life in this backwater." He drummed his manicured fingers against the leather steering wheel as he waited for the town's only traffic light to change. On the other end of the call, his assistant tried to sound sympathetic. "Your father thinks the Oak Ridge Resort project needs the personal Wilson touch. It's the company's biggest investment this quarter." "Personal touch," Robert scoffed. "That's rich coming from a man who hasn't left his penthouse in 3 years." He abruptly ended the call as he pulled into the parking lot of the Oak Ridge Inn, the town's only hotel until the Wilson Development Corporation's luxury resort was completed. The hotel manager practically tripped over himself rushing to greet Robert as he strode through the front doors, not bothering to handle his own luggage. "Mr. Wilson, what an honor! We've prepared our finest suite for you." Robert barely acknowledged the man, his eyes scanning the lobby with disapproval. The place was clean but dated, with furniture at least a decade old. "This will have to do, I suppose. Have my bags sent up immediately. And I'll need the conference room ready for meetings starting tomorrow morning." As he signed the registration paperwork, Robert didn't bother removing his sunglasses or pausing his one-handed texting. The manager's eager smile never wavered, even as Robert cut him off mid-sentence about local dining options. "I'll have my meals catered," Robert said flatly. "I doubt there's anything worth eating in this town." Within 24 hours, the Wilson name was on everyone's lips in Oak Ridge, and not in a good way. At the local diner, the waitresses compared notes about the rude newcomer who had demanded a table be cleared for him even though there was a line of people waiting. "He didn't even tip," Judy from the morning shift whispered. "Just wrote, 'Get a real job' on the receipt." At the hardware store, the owner was still fuming about Robert's visit. Came in demanding premium materials be delivered to the resort site immediately. When I told him we'd need to order special and it would take a few days, he asked if I understood what the word immediately meant or if the local schools were that bad. Robert had been sent to Oak Ridge with one mission: make sure the new luxury resort opened on schedule, no matter what corners needed to be cut. His father, the aging CEO of Wilson Development, had made it clear that this project would determine whether Robert was finally ready to take over the company. What the locals didn't know was that Robert was desperate to prove himself. 3 failed marriages and a string of business missteps had made him the family disappointment. This resort was his last chance to show his worth, and he wasn't about to let small-town rules or people stand in his way. Each morning, Robert would drive his Bentley to the construction site, where workers straightened their backs and foremen rushed to look busy. He moved through the site like he owned it, which technically his family did, pointing out flaws and demanding impossible deadlines. "My 5-year-old niece could build straighter walls," he told one crew. "Maybe I should fly her in to show you how it's done." In meetings with local officials, Robert's approach wasn't much better. He dropped not-so-subtle hints about campaign contributions and future developments while dismissing environmental concerns as tree-hugger nonsense. Most concerning to the town council was how Robert brushed off questions about the protected wetlands at the edge of the resort property. "That soggy patch. We'll handle it. Some problems just need the right solution." The way he smiled when he said it made even the pro-development council members uncomfortable. As the weeks passed, Robert became a fixture in Oak Ridge, the kind people warned each other about. Parents taught their teenagers to avoid serving his table, shopkeepers braced themselves when his car pulled up, and a local paper ran an editorial about respecting small-town values that didn't mention Robert by name but didn't need to. What Robert didn't realize was that his path was about to cross with someone who wouldn't be intimidated by his wealth or his name, someone who had been watching his company's moves with more understanding than he could possibly imagine. Rain drummed against the windows of Oak Ridge's only upscale coffee shop, The Daily Grind. The weather had turned nasty without warning, sending people scurrying inside for shelter. Among them was Lisa, her worn jacket darkened with rainwater, hair clinging to her face in damp strands. It was payday, and Lisa had been looking forward to this moment all month. Once every 4 weeks, she allowed herself one small luxury: a specialty caramel latte with an extra shot of espresso. At $5.75, it was an extravagance she carefully budgeted for, a tiny rebellion against the practical spending that ruled the rest of her life. The coffee shop was unusually crowded due to the downpour. Lisa joined the line, counting out exact change from her wallet while watching raindrops race down the windows. She hadn't noticed the sleek black Bentley pulling up outside, or the man who emerged from it without bothering with an umbrella, as if expecting the rain to know better than to touch him. The bell above the door chimed, and Robert Wilson I strode in, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and the squeak of Italian leather shoes against the tile floor. He scanned the crowded shop with obvious annoyance, his phone pressed to his ear. "I'm telling you, Jenkins, these environmental reports are just formalities," he said loudly. "Nobody actually reads them. Just get the permits pushed through." Lisa's ears perked up at the mention of environmental reports, but she kept her eyes down. A habit formed from years of being invisible to people like him. The line moved slowly. When Lisa finally reached second place, the teenage girl ahead of her was ordering an elaborate drink that required the barista to explain several times that yes, they could make it sugar-free, but no, they didn't have sugar-free caramel. Robert had been pacing near the door, his call finished but his patience clearly running thin. Suddenly, he walked directly to the front of the line, positioning himself between Lisa and the counter. "Grande Americano, black," he said to the barista, not even acknowledging Lisa's existence. The young barista, Kevin, looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's a line. I'll be with you as soon as I help this lady." He gestured toward Lisa, who offered a small smile of thanks. Robert turned, seeming to notice Lisa for the first time. He looked her up and down, taking in her faded jeans, worn sneakers, and the hotel housekeeper uniform partially visible under her jacket. A smirk formed on his lips. "Really?" he said, voice dripping with condescension. "You're going to make me wait for the cleaning lady? I have a conference call in 10 minutes with investors from Tokyo." The coffee shop quieted. People looked up from their laptops and conversations, sensing the confrontation brewing stronger than the coffee. "I don't mind waiting my turn," Lisa said quietly, her eyes meeting his steadily. "We all have places to be." Something about her calm dignity seemed to irritate Robert even more. His smirk widened into something ugly. "Oh, I'm sure. Those hotel toilets won't scrub themselves, will they?" He turned to address the room at large, as if inviting everyone to join his mockery. "Look at this. I'm the one bringing jobs and economic growth to this backwater town, and I have to wait behind someone who probably can't even afford to be in here." A few uncomfortable chuckles came from those too eager to please the wealthy newcomer, but most people looked away, embarrassed by his behavior. Lisa's cheeks flushed pink, but she remained composed. The barista looked horrified and began to hurriedly make Robert's drink, hoping to diffuse the situation. "Here you go, sir. On the house," Kevin said, sliding the Americano across the counter. Robert snatched it up with a triumphant glance at Lisa. "See, that's how the world works. Some people are meant to wait, and some people are meant to be waited on." He flipped a $20 bill onto the counter. "Keep the change. Maybe you can learn something from this." He turned back to Lisa, who hadn't moved. "As for you, I'd suggest the vending machine at that Fleabag hotel. More your speed, I'd think. Or maybe stick to the dollar store where you belong." Lisa stood perfectly still, rain still dripping from her coat onto the floor. The coffee shop had gone completely silent now. Even the espresso machine had stopped its hissing, as if holding its breath. "Actually," Lisa said, her voice surprisingly clear and steady, "I think I'll have my order now." She placed her exact change on the counter. "And I believe it's still my turn." Something in her voice, a quiet authority that seemed completely at odds with her appearance, made Robert pause. For just a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He had no idea what was coming next. None of them did. The coffee shop remained silent as Lisa took a small step forward. She set her purse on the counter and looked directly at Robert, her posture changing subtly. Gone was the slight stoop of her shoulders that came from years of bending over to make beds and scrub bathtubs. She stood straight now, her chin lifted. "My name is Lisa Chen," she said, her voice clear enough for everyone in the coffee shop to hear. "Not cleaning lady, not hotel maid. Lisa Chen." Robert rolled his eyes. "Does that make a difference? Look, I've got a call in 5 minutes." "I don't care about your call, Mr. Wilson," Lisa interrupted, surprising everyone, including herself. She hadn't raised her voice, but something in her tone made Robert's mouth snap shut. "Yes, I know who you are," she continued. "Robert Wilson III, heir to the Wilson Development Corporation." currently in charge of the Oak Ridge Resort project that's been bending environmental regulations and bypassing proper permits. Robert's face darkened. What did you just say? Who do you think? I think I'm someone you shouldn't have underestimated, Lisa said. She turned to address the coffee shop at large. Before I moved to Oak Ridge, I was senior researcher at the state Supreme Court. I graduated top of my class from Brighton Law School with a specialization in environmental law. Murmurs spread through the coffee shop. The barista's jaw dropped open. Robert's face went from red to white in seconds. That's not possible, he stammered, looking at her worn clothes and rain-soaked hair. Lisa smiled slightly. Because of how I look, because I clean hotel rooms. Life takes unexpected turns, Mr. Wilson. When my mother got sick, I left my career to care for her. The hotel job pays the bills while I finish my law degree online. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slightly worn ID card, holding it up for him to see. Brighton Law School, class of 2015. I deferred my final year. I'm 5 classes away from completing it now. The entire coffee shop was completely still. Someone's phone camera flashed. The moment was being recorded. That doesn't mean anything, Robert said, but his voice had lost its edge. You're still just. Just what? Lisa asked. Just someone who knows that Section 47.3 of the State Environmental Code prohibits development within 500 feet of protected wetlands without a special impact study. Just someone who understands that falsifying those studies is a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. Robert's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. How do you know about that? Lisa finished for him. Because environmental law is my passion. Because I've been following your company's projects for years. Because the Wilson Development Corporation has a history of cutting corners and paying fines as a cost of doing business. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear the next part. And because last month, when I was cleaning room 312, you left your laptop open with emails about handling the wetlands issue. You never even noticed me, did you? Just like you never notice any of the people who clean up after you. Robert's face had gone from white to gray. The coffee shop remained silent, everyone straining to hear. You can't prove anything, he whispered. Lisa smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Actually, I can. My final project for my degree is a case study on corporate environmental violations. Guess which company I chose? I've documented everything, Mr. Wilson, everything. Someone in the back of the shop started to clap. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire coffee shop erupted in applause. Robert looked around, his face a mixture of rage and panic. For the first time in his life, he had no comeback, no way to buy or bully his way out of the situation. You'll regret this, he hissed, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. Liz's expression remained calm. No, Mr. Wilson. I don't think I will. She turned back to the barista. I'll have my caramel latte now, Kevin. With an extra shot of espresso, please. As Kevin hurried to make her drink, his hands slightly shaking with excitement, Lisa addressed the coffee shop again. Her voice took on the measured cadence of someone used to speaking in courtrooms. What Mr. Wilson doesn't know is that there's more to this story, much more. She picked up her latte as Kevin slid it across the counter. And he's about to find out just how wrong he was to judge a book by its cover. Robert stood frozen, his expensive suit suddenly seeming to hang awkwardly on his frame, as Lisa walked calmly to a table by the window, sat down, and took her first sip of the latte she'd been looking forward to all month. Word of the coffee shop confrontation spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. By noon, nearly everyone had heard how the quiet hotel housekeeper had stood up to Robert Wilson II. What they didn't know yet was that the story was far from over. Robert sat in his hotel suite, tie loosened, watching the video of his humiliation circulate on local social media. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from his father, from company lawyers, from project managers wondering what this meant for the resort. How was I supposed to know she wasn't just some maid? He muttered, pouring himself a third scotch. He pulled up a search engine on his laptop and typed in Lisa Chen Brighton Law School. His stomach dropped as her face appeared on the screen, younger, hairstyled professionally, wearing a graduation gown and holding an award. The caption read, Lisa Chen receives Harrington Fellowship for Environmental Justice, 2015. A knock at the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. It was the hotel manager, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Wilson, there's a Judge Thompson here to see you. He says it's urgent." Robert nearly choked on his drink. Judge Thomas Thompson was the most respected federal judge in the state, and the last person Robert wanted to see right now. "Send him up," Robert said, quickly hiding the scotch bottle and straightening his tie. The judge was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he spent his weekends fishing rather than at country clubs. He declined Robert's nervous offer of a seat. "I'll be brief, Mr. Wilson," Judge Thompson said. "I've known Lisa Chen for 10 years. Her mother was Dr. Mai Chen, the environmental scientist who documented the ecological importance of the wetlands your company is currently bulldozing." Robert felt the floor tilt beneath him. Dr. Chen, the author of the Eastern Watershed Protection Guidelines, that was Lisa's mother. The judge nodded. "Mai was my wife's closest friend. When she got sick, Lisa put her career on hold to care for her. Not everyone would make that sacrifice." "I didn't know," Robert whispered, though he knew that was no excuse. "There's more you don't know," Judge Thompson continued. "After Mai died last year, her research notes were donated to the university. A team of graduate students has been using her methodology to test water samples from the creeks surrounding your development site." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the coffee table between them. "The results show elevated levels of chemicals consistent with illegal dumping. The samples were taken from property your company claimed was unaffected by the construction." Robert stared at the folder but didn't touch it. "Those tests could be flawed. We have our own environmental assessment FAT." "That was conducted by EcoTest Labs," the judge interrupted. "A company owned by your father's college roommate, which has been cited 3 times for falsifying reports." Robert's mouth went dry. "How do you know all this?" "Because Lisa has been quietly building this case for months as part of her law school project. She chose your company because of her mother's work, not knowing you'd come to Oak Ridge personally." The judge's expression softened slightly. "She wasn't targeting you specifically, Mr. Wilson. This is about justice for her mother's life's work." Robert collapsed into a chair, the full weight of his situation hitting him. "What happens now?" "That depends," Judge Thompson said. "I'm meeting Lisa for dinner tonight. She hasn't officially filed anything yet." "She's blackmailing me?" Robert asked. The judge's eyes hardened. "No, she's giving you a chance to do the right thing before this goes public. More than you deserve after how you treated her." After the judge left, Robert sat motionless for nearly an hour. Finally, he picked up his phone and made the call he'd been dreading. "Dad, we have a problem with the Oak Ridge project. A big one." Across town, Lisa sat in her tiny apartment, surrounded by stacks of environmental reports, legal textbooks, and her mother's research journals. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from townsfolk who'd witnessed the coffee shop showdown. On her desk sat a framed photo of her mother in wading boots, standing in the very wetlands the Wilson Corporation was destroying. Lisa touched the glass gently. "I promised I'd finish what you started, Mom," she whispered. "And I will." Her phone rang, Judge Thompson calling to tell her about his meeting with Robert. As she listened to the judge describe Robert's reaction, Lisa felt no satisfaction in the man's distress, only determination to see things made right. What neither Lisa nor Robert knew was that a national environmental news blog had already picked up the coffee shop video. By morning, the story of the housekeeper lawyer and the wetlands violation would reach far beyond the small town of Oak Ridge, and the Wilson Corporation would face its biggest public relations disaster in decades. Robert Wilson I had never experienced anything like the chaos that erupted by the next morning. His phone began ringing at 5:42 a.m. and hadn't stopped since. The hotel lobby was swarming with reporters by breakfast, forcing him to order room service and draw the curtains. "What do you mean it's gone viral?" he shouted into his phone. His company's head of public relations sounded close to tears on the other end. "The video has over 2 million views, Mr. Wilson. It's been picked up by 3 national news networks. They're calling it Housekeeper Lawyer Exposes Environmental Corruption. Your father is..." The PR director paused. "My father is what?" Robert demanded. "He's on his way there. His private jet took off an hour ago. Robert felt the blood drain from his face. Harold Wilson I hadn't left New York in 3 years, not even for his youngest daughter's wedding. If he was flying to Oak Ridge, the situation was worse than Robert had imagined. Across town, Lisa was overwhelmed by the sudden attention. She'd arrived at the hotel for her morning shift only to be pulled aside by her manager. "You can't work today," he said, looking both concerned and impressed. "There are reporters in the lobby asking for you. And this came for you by courier." He handed her a thick envelope with the Brighton Law School seal. Inside was a letter from the Dean of Students. "In light of recent events and your exemplary application of legal principles in a real-world context, we are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to complete your remaining coursework in residence." Lisa's hand trembled as she read. After years of online classes squeezed between work shifts, they were offering her the chance to return to campus and finish her degree properly. Before she could process this news, her phone rang. It was an environmental law firm in the state capital. "Ms. Chen, we've been following your work on the Wilson development case. We'd like to discuss the possibility of you joining our team once you complete your degree." Lisa sat down on a bench outside the hotel, her head spinning. 24 hours ago, she had been invisible, just another housekeeper no one noticed. Now job offers and reporters were appearing out of nowhere. At the construction site of the Wilson Resort, work had ground to a halt. State environmental officials had arrived at dawn, carrying copies of Lisa's documentation and testing equipment. Yellow tape now surrounded the contested wetlands area, and workers stood in clusters, wondering if they'd still have jobs by the end of the day. The town mayor called an emergency council meeting, concerned about what the scandal would mean for Oak Ridge's economy. The resort had promised jobs and tourism dollars the town desperately needed. "This doesn't have to be the end of the project," Judge Thompson explained to the worried council members. "The development can proceed if they redesign to protect the wetlands and clean up the contamination they've caused. They just need to follow the law." By mid-afternoon, a sleek private jet touched down at the small regional airport. Harold Wilson Iyer, looking every bit the billionaire in his tailored suit despite being in his 70s, was driven directly to his son's hotel. The hotel staff whispered as the famous businessman crossed the lobby. One maid nudged her colleague. "That's her boss's boss's boss." The confrontation between father and son was brief but devastating. Hotel guests in neighboring rooms could hear the elder Wilson's voice through the walls. 30 years I've spent building this company, and you destroy our reputation in one day. Not because of the environmental issues, those we could have fixed quietly, but because you publicly humiliated a woman whose mother was a respected scientist and whose mentor is a federal judge." Robert tried to defend himself. "How was I supposed to know who she was? She's a housekeeper." "That's exactly the problem," his father thundered. "You think the only people who matter are people like us. That arrogance has now cost our company millions and made us look like villains across the country." Later that evening, the Wilson Corporation issued a press release. Robert Wilson I was being removed from the Oak Ridge project effective immediately. The company was halting construction to conduct a comprehensive environmental review and would work with local authorities to develop a new plan that respects the ecological importance of the area. What the press release didn't mention was that Robert had been suspended from all company operations pending a board review of his position. As the sun set over Oak Ridge, Lisa sat in Judge Thompson's living room with a team of environmental lawyers. On the coffee table between them lay her mother's research journals and the offer letter from Brighton Law School. "You've won," one of the lawyers told her. "The question now is, what do you want to do next?" Lisa looked at her mother's handwriting in the journals. "I want to make sure this never happens again," she said. "Not here and not anywhere else." Little did she know that this was just the beginning of her story, not the end. 6 months had passed since the day in the coffee shop that changed everything. The leaves in Oak Ridge had turned from summer green to autumn gold and back to the fresh green of spring. Much like the seasons, both Lisa Chen and Robert Wilson II had gone through their own transformations. Lisa sat in the back row of the Brighton Law School auditorium, dressed in graduation robes. Her fingers traced the gold honors cord draped around her neck as the dean called names. After years of online classes squeezed between cleaning hotel rooms, she had finished her degree in just 1 semester back on campus. Lisa Chen, the dean announced, graduating with highest honors. As Lisa walked across the stage to receive her diploma, a small group in the audience erupted in cheers. The housekeeping staff from the Oak Ridge Hotel had closed ranks to cover each other's shifts and drove 3 hours to surprise her. Among them was Kevin, the coffee shop barista, who had become one of her closest friends. What no one in the audience knew was that tomorrow morning, Lisa would be starting her new job at the State Environmental Protection Agency. The position had been created specifically for her, a special counsel role focusing on corporate compliance with wetlands regulations. Her mother's research methodologies would now be part of the official state guidelines for environmental assessment. Across the state, in a much different setting, Robert Wilson sat alone in a small apartment. Gone was the luxury penthouse, the company credit card, and the Bentley. After being suspended from the family company, he had experienced what it meant to live without the Wilson name opening doors. His coffee table was covered with documents, application forms for business school, notes from therapy sessions, and a draft of a letter he'd rewritten a dozen times. It was addressed to Lisa Chen. Robert picked up the letter again, reading his own handwriting. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now. What happened in that coffee shop forced me to see myself through others' eyes for the first time." The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Robert opened the door to find his younger sister standing there, looking out of place in the modest hallway in her expensive clothes. "The board meeting just ended," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Dad announced the new company ethics policy and environmental standards. "Let me guess, they're calling it the Don't Pull a Robert rules," he said with a bitter smile. His sister didn't laugh. "Actually, they're calling it the Chen Initiative. Dad's been working with Lisa's environmental law team for months. They're completely redesigning the Oak Ridge project." Robert sat down heavily. "So Dad's found his new star. Good for Lisa." "That's not all," his sister continued. "Lisa declined the company's settlement offer. Instead, she asked that the money be used to establish a scholarship for people who want to change careers to environmental law." Robert looked up, surprised. "She didn't take the money? After what I did to her?" "She said something about knowing what it's like to have to start over." His sister handed him a business card. "She also suggested you might be interested in the community service program they're starting next month. Environmental restoration work in the wetlands." Robert took the card, turning it over in his hands. "Why would she think I'd be interested in that?" "Because it counts toward the court-ordered community service from your settlement with the EPA. And because she thinks everyone deserves a second chance." The next morning, in the restored wetlands outside Oak Ridge, an unusual meeting took place. Lisa stood with a team of environmental scientists, pointing out areas where native plants needed to be reintroduced. She wore boots very similar to the ones her mother had worn in the photograph on her desk. "The water quality has already improved by 30%, one scientist explained. But we need more community involvement to keep the momentum going." Lisa nodded, then glanced at her watch. "The first volunteer group should be arriving soon." As if on cue, a van pulled up, and a group of people in work clothes climbed out. Among them, looking uncomfortable in jeans that still had creases from the store, was Robert Wilson II. When he spotted Lisa, he froze, clearly unsure if he should approach her. She saved him the trouble by walking over, hand extended professionally. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Wilson," she said simply. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again," he admitted, shaking her hand awkwardly. Lisa looked out over the wetlands her mother had fought to protect. "This was never about you or me. It was about this place and all the other places like it." As volunteers gathered around for instructions, the town mayor arrived with a news crew. "We're here to announce the formation of Oak Ridge's first Environmental Oversight Committee," the mayor explained to the camera. "A partnership between citizens, scientists, and businesses to ensure sustainable development." Lisa stepped forward to make a statement as the committee's chairperson. Behind her, Robert picked up a shovel, ready to begin the day's restoration work. The simple woman who had been mocked in a coffee shop now stood as a community leader, and the rich bully who had made the mistake of judging her was learning, one shovelful at a time, what it meant to build something meaningful that would last beyond himself.